see how we can follow that. So I'm Claire Fram, and my colleague Andrew is over there as well. And we are from Diagonal, which is a small company building open source products, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So sort of a different end of the spectrum compared to where our previous speaker was coming from. And we're going to talk about our bet on open source underpinning our business model. But if you were in the morning plenary, you will know that open source is not a business model, which is something we are very attuned to. So just a little bit of who we are. We are a technology company working with data to help you understand and shape the urban environment. So we work with planners, architects, and anybody really who touches data when it comes to understanding and planning the built environment. And we do that at a human scale. That's sort of our video cannot be loaded. Sad. Sad. Well, let's see if I can do a quick, should be available offline. Let's try again. Here we go. We do that at a human scale. It largely drives a lot of the work that we do. So here's just an example. It's always easier to see something than just talk about it, where we built a bit of code to understand, as you move through a space, what can you actually see? What does it feel like? And underneath that little animation that you see, we are able to, is the project Bedrock, which we've made open source. So our underlying code is an open source analysis engine. And then we build other projects like this, where we were working with a client to understand current and future health needs for populations, and what does it mean if you want to change how you are servicing healthcare to our changing population. And they needed to understand really at a local level what their population looked like, what conditions did they have, what were the other demographics, and then also when you start to talk about what does it mean to provide them new healthcare options, you have to understand them in their local environment. So again, underneath this little video that you've seen is our open source engine, as well as open source simulated population that we've created. And because open source is not a business model, we are also building a user interface that wraps around our analysis engine to help you, again, really focused at a human scale. If you're trying to change what places look like, you need to know how people experience places. So understanding basic things like accessibility, analysis, which is maybe a little bit on the technical jargony side of things. So that's what we do. Those are the tools that we built, but how did we get here? We built these tools because we think that the planning system is not as systems-based as it should be. We have increasingly complex sort of mental models of how everything is interrelated. This morning we heard a lot of good talks on that as well, when we think about how does mental health intersect with physical, kind of environmental conditions. There's increasing understanding of interactions, but that actually, our tools weren't allowing us to explore these in the ways that we felt was necessary. There was still this friction point there. So as technologists, we got together and we said, okay, let's build those tools. Great. You can build anything, but we thought also about how do we want to solve these problems. And there's sort of three things that I think we put in place. So maybe speaking to the governance and there was another topic from the previous talk. I was going to pull up governance, and what was the fourth? Does anybody remember the fourth category? No, okay. Strategy. Thank you, Stephen. Yes. We've put these things in place. One is a charter, so what is our purpose, setting out our mission. And when it comes to open source, I think this is important because we're putting out our stall, and anybody who looks at either the source code that we've released or kind of the knock-on effects as we apply this work out in the world, making real changes to the environment, they can go back to understand who's actually building that. The second thing that we put in place were sort of unusual articles of association. So we've made our company a steward-owned company, and that commits us to legally to three things. One, ownership of the company will remain in the company. The second is that purpose will come before profit. And the third is that we will build technology responsibly and not contravene any universal basic human rights. So again, I think when it comes to open source, we see those as not only communicating to people using our tools and seeing knock-on effects, what we're doing, but also holds us legally accountable with some teeth. And then the third thing that I think underpins how we wanted to do this was build with open source software. And why do we need to do this if we've sort of got these other things in place? And that's because everything is fine in technology in 2024. You know, we can look around and we see a lot of examples of quite worrying ways technology is impacting our world. Here's a cat who's being consumed by Facebook. We know that as recently as 2023, several states in the United States are suing Meta for mental health harms that Instagram allegedly causes within adolescents. So I don't think that was the original intent of building a social network, but this is sort of a consequence we're grappling with now. Pulling it closer to the space that we work in the built environment. You maybe even took a dockless bike to get here today. But we saw an explosion of these types of sort of new app-based technology. It's a bike, but we had this explosion of competition for these types of mobility services around cities that ended up sort of littering cities in a lot of communities where they weren't expecting to have it. And in the case of Jump, when Uber and Lime merged, Uber ended up with thousands of these bikes that went to landfill. And it's only through really grassroots efforts where infrastructure, hardware like this, can be sort of unlocked and repurposed and reused. But the vision that we see here of making our cities easier to travel on these bikes ended up sort of not where they intended, I think, originally. But it's not all like doom and gloom. Like, bikes aren't the problem. So don't come away from this talk thinking bikes are the problem. There's the sort of famous quote of, if you asked Henry Ford, like, what do people want? People would say a faster horse. But like, lucky for us, he didn't listen to us. He built these internal combustion engines. But I don't think he also asked, like, do you want a daily habit of contributing to climate change, which will have existential kind of disastrous repercussions? So what do we take away from this? These are all examples of like technology entering our world. I think in most cases, the initial motivations were positive. But it's really hard to predict how technology will be used. We see time and time again a truth. Motivations matter. So how do we ensure alignment between products that are built and initial motivations that are set out? And we just don't know everything. The world keeps changing, and as we learn new things, how do we adapt and adapt our tools to the problems at hand? So that's why we at Diagonal have put a bet on open source. It is part of our commercial strategy. We think that there is value to be had in the sort of services around our open source engine that we can provide. But it's also part of this idea of legacy, which is sort of a self-aggrandizing term, but speaks to our recognition that whether the work that we do the work that we've done is out there in the world, it will have longer lasting repercussions than just the project that we're involved in. And we hope that there's a way to make sure that as the world changes, as motivations diverge, there's sort of a way for broader, maybe social contracts to help steer the application of our technology towards this positive impact that we are seeking. So if any of what I've said has been interesting, or you've got questions about our governance model or how we're working, please do get in touch with us. We're always very interested to hear from folks working in this space. Thank you very much.